five-clawed dragons, imperial rain marks, and hidden royal seals. To an untrained eye, these look like simple vintage decorations. But to the world's top art experts, they are the ultimate holy grail. Welcome to our channel. In this episode, we're counting down the most valuable and breathtaking imperial treasures ever uncovered on Antiques Roadshow. You won't believe how much these pieces are worth today. Before we dive into these shocking appraisals, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more mind-blowing discoveries.
I would put a replacement value on this at $30,000.
Are you kidding me? Woo! Already. That is more than I expected.
Not every discarded piece of paper ends up becoming a highly sought-after collectible. It's even harder to imagine that these sketches were once crumpled up and thrown into a classroom trash can. At the time, no one could have predicted that the student who drew them would one day become one of the world's most famous entertainers. Fortunately, one classmate decided to save them.
I brought you a couple sketches from Michael Jackson. I had the opportunity of being in school with him in 10th grade. And that was a school in Encino where there's about 90 students. So I had an art class with him. And I would watch him draw these drawings, and then he'd ball it up and throw it away. I asked him one day, I love that Charlie Chaplin drawing, can I have that?
What impressed the appraiser most was not simply the sketches themselves, but the story behind how they were preserved. Both drawings came directly from Michael Jackson immediately after he finished them, rather than through a gallery or a major auction. That creates an exceptionally strong provenance, making them far more significant than ordinary celebrity memorabilia.
But he didn't sign it. And so I got home and my dad said, that should probably be signed. And he sent me back to school and I had him sign it, and he just picked up a crayon and signed Michael Jackson.
The appraiser also pointed out that the most fascinating feature was not the signature, but the subject itself, Charlie Chaplin. Michael Jackson admired Chaplin throughout his life, and even recorded Smile many years later as a tribute. These sketches therefore capture more than a classroom moment. They reveal an artistic inspiration that stayed with him throughout his career.
Well, one of the great things about it is, the Michael Jackson signatures on both of them are very, very nice, look absolutely correct. But it's the Chaplin art that really screams out to me, because throughout a lot of his life, he really tried to compare himself with Chaplin.
Original sketches by Michael Jackson rarely appear on the market, so the appraiser consulted fellow specialists before reaching a valuation. Their rarity, combined with such a well-documented ownership history, makes these two drawings especially desirable to collectors.
I spoke with a couple of my colleagues. It's tough, there aren't a lot of comparables out there, but we feel that these would perform very strongly at auction and would give an estimate of between $8,000 and $10,000 each.
Oh, that's great. That's awesome. Thank you.
The appraiser estimated that each sketch is worth $8,000 to $10,000. Their value comes not from Michael Jackson's drawing technique alone, but from the remarkable story behind them, their direct provenance, and their unique connection to Charlie Chaplin. What began as a few discarded classroom sketches ultimately became rare keepsakes that preserve a little-known chapter in the early life of the King of Pop. Sometimes the most valuable item in a house is the one everyone forgot was there. This story begins with an old diary that had been passed down through a family for decades. Nobody suspected it was hiding anything important until one day a small piece of paper was discovered between its pages, where it had remained unnoticed for nearly 60 years.
My great uncle was friends with NILE KINNICK when he was in a fraternity brother at the University of Iowa. He gave it to me before he passed away, and he gave us the book A Hero Perished. It was NILE KINNICK's diary. Inside the book was this program, and for 59 years, my dad didn't know it, my grandfather didn't know it.
The item turned out to be a program from the 1939 Heisman Trophy presentation. By itself, it was a modest piece of paper that could easily be overlooked. What made it special was not the program itself, but the person connected to it and the story that followed his remarkable rise to fame.
So ironic that 4 years later, he's enlisted in the Navy, he becomes a pilot, and his plane goes down in a training mission in the Caribbean Sea and he dies.
It's the kind of story that transforms a sports collectible into something much more meaningful. This isn't simply a reminder of an outstanding football season. It's also a reminder of a life that ended far too soon. Items connected to NILE KINNICK carry a unique emotional weight because they represent both achievement and loss, and that's what gives a small program like this a significance far beyond its size.
Put an auction estimate of $8,000 to $12,000.
Wow. Cool. The fact that they were friends is the most important thing to me.
I'd insure it for $20,000.
Okay, that's awesome.
An auction estimate of $8,000 to $12,000. An insurance value of $20,000. Those are impressive numbers for something that sat unnoticed for 59 years. But the owner's response revealed what mattered most. Sometimes the greatest value in memorabilia isn't the signature or the appraisal. It's the connection it creates between an ordinary family and a person whose story continues to be remembered long after he was gone. If a genuine Picasso had been hanging on the wall above your kitchen stove for decades, would you even realize it? It sounds like the kind of story that's almost impossible to believe. Yet that's exactly how the next appraisal begins. For years, this ceramic plate was simply another familiar decoration that everyone in the family saw every single day. No one thought it was extraordinary. No one imagined it could become one of the biggest surprises of their visit to Antiques Roadshow.
We bought it in Rhode Island. Didn't even realize it was a Picasso until about 5 years ago.
The family had lived with this piece for a very long time. It had always been part of the house. It wasn't locked away for protection. It wasn't displayed as fine art. It was simply another household object that blended naturally into everyday life. There was never any reason to question what it might actually be.
That it hung over the stove in the kitchen.
Everything changed because of a completely unexpected encounter. A single reaction from someone with professional knowledge was enough to make the family see the plate in an entirely different way. For the first time, they began to wonder whether they had overlooked something remarkable for decades.
Then the guy sort of gasped and said, "Over your stove?" And I said, "Yeah, I have a plate collection."
From that moment on, the process of verifying the plate's identity officially began. The experts carefully examined its details, comparing every characteristic until the true story of the piece slowly came into focus. What had once been treated as ordinary kitchen decor was now entering an entirely different world.
The actual name for this particular dish is Face in an Oval. Picasso did a lot of these special editions for the MADOURA studio in the south of France.
All right.
He actually did 633 different objects that were taken and they made special editions for. Some are jugs, some are figures, and some are dishes of different shapes and all. Now, you did mention that there was a little bit of enamel loss there,
Yes.
and we do see that pretty regularly on some of these pieces that have high relief.
Yes.
But otherwise, it's in quite remarkable condition. What's really important to note for this is that in this particular issue, and by the way, this was done in 1955.
By now, everyone understood that this was far more than a decorative plate. Only one question remained unanswered. What was it actually worth in today's market?
The Picasso market, in the last 4 or 5 years, it's skyrocketed. It's just taken off tremendously. So you're snickering in advance. This is good. So what do you think it's worth today?
I haven't a clue.
You haven't a clue? Would you be surprised that an auction value in today's market, probably on the conservative side, would be in the range of $10,000 to $15,000? I love you too.
From a ceramic plate that spent decades hanging quietly above a family kitchen stove, to an authenticated work valued at between $10,000 and $15,000. It's a reminder that the line between an everyday decoration and a collectible work of art can be far smaller than most of us ever imagine. Not every work of art is created for exhibition or to be sold to collectors. Sometimes it begins as nothing more than a heartfelt gift for a close friend. That is exactly what makes this drawing so special. More than a century later, the story behind it has become just as important as the artwork itself.
Jessie M. King was a friend of my grandmother.
Yes.
And from this poem, Jessie M. King decided to do this very nice drawing and named it after my grandmother and gave my grandmother the pet name of Kilmeny at that time.
Right.
And gave the drawing to my grandmother.
What impressed the appraiser most was the drawing's almost perfect provenance. It was presented directly by Jessie M. King to its original owner, rather than passing through galleries or private collections. Jessie M. King herself was one of the leading figures of the Glasgow style, the artistic movement that helped bring Scottish Art Nouveau to international recognition.
What was so extraordinary about Glasgow at this period, at the turn of the century, was that, in a way, it was far ahead of other movements. They were the toast of Vienna. I mean, Vienna was blown away by this Glasgow style, what we know as the Glasgow style.
The appraiser also explained that the artwork was executed on vellum, a premium material that demanded exceptional precision. Its delicate penwork left virtually no room for correction, making every line a demonstration of Jessie M. King's remarkable skill. That craftsmanship is one of the reasons why her original drawings continue to be highly prized by Art Nouveau collectors.
It's not like paper where the light bounces off the surfaces here. It is almost translucent. And then the other thing, by the time we start looking at this drawing, then we begin to really marvel at Jessie King, because we see this minute penwork. And we have to remember that she couldn't change anything.
Taking into account the artistic quality, the vellum support, the period in which it was created, and its remarkable ownership history, the appraiser concluded that the drawing deserved a significantly higher valuation than originally expected. Together, those qualities have given the piece lasting appeal among collectors.
I would be tempted to put £5,000 on it, but because it is such a beautiful, perfect Art Nouveau Jessie King, I think that £10,000 is much more appropriate.
The appraiser ultimately increased the valuation to £10,000. Its value comes not only from Jessie M. King's reputation, but also from its direct provenance, its vellum support, and its classic Art Nouveau style. What began as a personal gift between two friends has become an outstanding example of the Glasgow style, and a work that many Art Nouveau collectors would be delighted to own. Not every treasured possession begins with a carefully planned search. Sometimes, an ordinary decision made decades earlier leads to one of the most memorable appraisals on the show. This set of prints has exactly that kind of story. What caught the experts' attention wasn't just the beauty of the images, but the history behind them.
They are Alphonse Muchas, the 4 seasons: spring, summer, autumn, and winter. And I've had them for the last 50 years. I paid $200 for them.
The moment the appraiser heard the artist's name, he knew these were far more than decorative prints. Alphonse Mucha was one of the defining figures of the Art Nouveau movement, celebrated for his elegant female figures and flowing decorative style. His work didn't just create beautiful images, it helped transform the way people experienced printed art at the end of the 19th century.
Alphonse Mucha was arguably the single greatest Art Nouveau artist of the year. In fact, Art Nouveau is often referred to as Le Style Mucha. They named the form after him, and this is sort of a masterwork of his artistry.
The Four Seasons was created as a series of decorative panels rather than a traditional advertising poster. At the time, lithographs like these made it possible for ordinary families to own artwork designed by a celebrated artist without purchasing an expensive oil painting. That was one of the reasons this series quickly became one of Mucha's most admired creations.
This was the first series of decorative panels that Mucha designed for the printer, and this series of decorative panels was so popular, all of a sudden people in Paris who hadn't been able to afford oil paintings were able to buy these lithographic paintings and decorate their homes relatively inexpensively.
As he continued examining the set, the appraiser noted that all 4 prints had remained together and were still in very good condition. Although they differ in some ways from the earliest impressions, that does little to reduce their appeal among collectors. Those observations ultimately led to the final valuation.
The Four Seasons in this kind of good condition. At auction, I would estimate these 4 as a group between $12,000 and $18,000.
That's awesome. That is really awesome.
The appraiser estimated the complete set at $12,000 to $18,000 at auction. That value reflects not only Alphonse Mucha's reputation, but also the lasting influence of Art Nouveau, the early production date, and the fact that all 4 panels have remained together for more than a century. A collection that began with a simple newspaper advertisement ultimately became proof that an ordinary purchase can turn into an extraordinary discovery many decades later. If a piece of furniture in your home didn't come from an auction or a gallery, but instead came from the fact that your family personally knew the craftsman who made it, how much would that change its value? That's exactly how the story of these two benches begins. At first glance, they look like ordinary wooden benches that have simply been part of a family's everyday life for decades. But behind their simple appearance is a connection that collectors around the world would love to have.
My aunt and uncle's estate. My uncle was a renowned modernist architect in Riverside, California, and he knew Sam Maloof personally.
That personal relationship is what brought these two benches into the family's home. They were never mass-produced pieces. They weren't purchased years later through an antique dealer or at a high-profile auction. Instead, they came directly from the hands of the man who created them. That alone made this appraisal different from almost every other furniture story featured on the program.
Sam Maloof is certainly one of the A guys of 20th century design.
Over the decades, Sam Maloof's reputation has continued to grow. Collectors have become increasingly eager to own his work, and original examples rarely stay on the market for long. Among all of his creations, benches like these appear far less frequently than many of his better-known designs. Their scarcity has only made them more desirable over time.
The benches are rare. They don't show up as often. People really covet them.
These benches represent far more than beautifully crafted furniture. They reflect the handmade philosophy that helped establish Sam Maloof as one of the defining figures in 20th century American furniture design. As appreciation for his work has continued to grow, so has the demand for pieces connected directly to his workshop.
I believe they were appraised at that point for a replacement value of $8,000 each.
Years earlier, that valuation had already seemed remarkably high. But like many legendary designers featured throughout this video, Maloof's market has continued to climb. Now it was time to find out what these benches were worth today.
For insurance purposes, I would value these at probably $12,000, $13,000, $14,000 a piece. These are great pieces. They're really rare.
Yeah, wow.
From an earlier replacement value of about $8,000 each, to a current insurance value of approximately $12,000 to $14,000 per bench. Once again, time has proven that furniture created simply to be used every day can eventually become highly sought-after works of design collected by enthusiasts around the world. Not everyone gets the chance to meet a legend while they're quietly building their legacy. Even fewer people end up bringing home a piece of furniture made by that legend's own hands. But that's exactly what happened to this family in the early 1970s. While the father stayed home watching football, the mother and her young daughter decided to drive to New Hope, Pennsylvania to visit a woodworker she had heard people talking about. At the time, it seemed like nothing more than a pleasant day trip. No one could have imagined that this single visit would transform the value of one family heirloom for more than 50 years to come.
And we went to New Hope, Pennsylvania. She'd heard about a woodworker, George Nakashima.
That woodworker was George Nakashima. Today, he is widely regarded as one of the most influential furniture designers and craftsmen in American history. But back then, the family wasn't searching for a future collectible. They simply wanted to commission a beautiful bench for their home. Several months later, Nakashima personally sent them the original design drawing. Remarkably, that drawing has remained with the bench ever since.
It's extraordinary that you have this drawing by George Nakashima.
It wasn't just an ordinary sketch. Every line reflected Nakashima's creative process. He carefully selected the exact slab of wood that would become the finished piece, embracing its grain, knots, and natural character instead of trying to hide them. To him, the wood itself was part of the artwork. That philosophy would eventually make his furniture some of the most sought-after pieces in the collector's market.
He's even chosen the piece of wood, and in his studio he had planks and planks of wood that...
I do remember that.
Do you?
Yes, I do.
Well, he was in love with wood.
Years earlier, the family had been told the bench was worth around $6,000. At the time, that already sounded impressive. But the market for George Nakashima's work continued to grow dramatically. By the time this appraisal took place, the value had reached an entirely different level.
We had it valued by the Nakashima Group in early 2000, and it was, I think, around $6,000.
The market is exploded in Nakashima furniture. Benches like this at auction are selling for $40,000.
Oh my God.
Now, because you have the drawing, you get to add a few thousand more on top of that. So say we're at the $45,000 mark. For insurance, you might want to raise it higher, but this is, I'd say $45,000.
Oh my God.
From an original commission that cost about $375, the bench is now valued at approximately $45,000. But the most remarkable part of this story isn't simply the increase in value, it's the fact that this family unknowingly preserved not only a beautiful piece of furniture, but an original work created by the hands of a man who would later become a true legend of American furniture design.
It was actually my grandmother's guitar. She bought it from her brother right before he left for World War II, with the intentions of selling it back to him when he arrived back home, but a few things changed. She kept the guitar, passed it down to my father, and my father recently passed it to me.
This guitar entered the family almost like a temporary arrangement. A brother was about to leave for World War II. His sister bought the guitar from him, planning to sell it back when he came home. But life changed, the plan changed, and the guitar stayed. From the grandmother, it passed to the father, and then to the grandson. At first, it might have seemed like a family keepsake that had simply survived 3 generations. But once the appraiser checked the serial number, the story shifted fast. This was a 1933 Martin D18. This guitar had an Adirondack spruce top, mahogany back and sides, and an ebony fingerboard and bridge-the-right details for a serious D18 from that period. And when it was played, it still had the kind of sound the appraiser called world-class. But this case was not just a simple value reveal. There was a problem. The top had been refinished or overfinished, changing the color of the face and reducing its originality. To someone outside the collecting world, that might not sound too serious. But in vintage guitars, the original finish is a major part of the value. The guitar was still rare, it still sounded incredible. It was still a 1937 Martin D18, but one altered layer on the top was enough to make the market recalculate everything.
I think in the retail environment, this guitar would sell for somewhere between $15,000 and $18,000.
Wow. Wow. Nice.
If this guitar had nothing done to it, it would be worth approximately $35,000.
$15,000 to $18,000 was still a very strong number. But the real twist came next. If the top had never been altered, the guitar could have been worth around $35,000. One layer of finish had nearly doubled the difference. Still, this Martin had not lost its meaning. It was still the guitar the grandmother kept, the father played, and the next generation inherited. The condition may have lowered its market value, but its sound and family story remained completely intact. For years, this artwork sat quietly behind stacks of boxes in a garage, before eventually ending up in the basement as nothing more than an old decorative piece. No one in the family really knew what it might be worth. The only clue was the signature of Salvador Dalí in the corner. But with Dalí's work, a famous signature alone is never enough to prove anything.
Found it in my parents' garage about 5 years ago, tucked away behind a bunch of boxes.
According to the owner, the artwork entered the family as either repayment for a loan or a thank you gift connected to his uncle's art gallery in Chicago. Over time, however, that story faded away, and the piece became little more than a framed picture hanging around the house. The appraiser's biggest question wasn't the family history, it was whether this was a genuine limited edition print or simply another reproduction bearing Dalí's name.
So it's a lithograph by Salvador Dalí.
Okay.
He signed it down here in pencil. And you can see down here, it's a limited edition of 150, pencil numbered there.
Okay.
Confirming that it was a genuine limited edition lithograph completely changed the story. Dalí had personally signed it in pencil, numbered it as one of only 150 impressions, and published it in 1965. Those are exactly the details collectors look for. The image also relates to one of Dalí's best-known surrealist ideas, developed from Venus de Milo with drawers, where the drawers symbolize hidden memories and the unconscious mind.
It's based on an earlier sculpture as well as an earlier painting that he had made in 1936.
Wow, okay.
The sculpture is now very well known. It's called the Venus de Milo with drawers.
That connection to one of Dalí's most iconic works makes Drawers of Memory especially recognizable. At the same time, the market for Dalí prints is well known for reproductions and questionable signatures. That is why confirming the edition, the signature, and the authenticity matters far more than simply seeing the artist's name. After examining every detail, the appraiser reached his conclusion.
Only 150 of these were made, so
Okay.
it's fairly scarce from 1965.
Mhm.
I would put a replacement value on this at $30,000.
Are you kidding me?
An artwork that had spent years forgotten in a garage and later tucked away in a basement was finally recognized for the value it had possessed all along. At first glance, this cabinet appears to be elegant but remarkably understated. There are no elaborate carvings, no gilded details, and nothing designed to command immediate attention. Because of that, many people could easily walk right past it without realizing they had just overlooked one of the finest examples of late 18th century English furniture. Only after a closer inspection did the experts begin to notice the subtle details that revealed it was anything but ordinary.
It belongs to a friend of mine, and it was inherited by her late husband in 1940s, and I presume it had been in the family for quite a long time.
Be interesting to see how far back in that family.
The late 18th century marked the golden age of English cabinet making. As exotic hardwoods arrived from across the expanding British Empire, satinwood quickly became one of the most sought-after materials among the wealthy. Its naturally luminous golden color and remarkable depth made it especially prized, while its high cost and challenging nature meant only the finest craftsmen could work with it successfully.
And you could actually walk past it. You know, it doesn't stand and say something until you do stop and look. And then one starts to realize that these oval panels, this is satinwood, which was an extremely expensive exotic veneer from the last quarter of the 18th century.
The longer the cabinet was examined, the more exceptional it became. Delicate stringing in rosewood, ebony, and boxwood blended almost seamlessly into the satinwood veneer, while the mahogany interior displayed the same meticulous workmanship. These hidden details often reveal far more about a cabinet maker's skill than its outward appearance. Its overall quality also reminded the appraiser of leading designers such as Thomas Sheraton and George Hepplewhite, and even prestigious workshops like Ince and Mayhew, renowned for producing furniture for Britain's aristocracy.
So what at first looks like just a nice, well-designed cabinet or cupboard is in fact an exceptional piece of furniture. So goodness knows, this was made by an important maker. It could be someone like Ince and Mayhew.
That is what makes this cabinet so remarkable. Its value comes not from extravagant decoration, but from rare materials, masterful veneering, and craftsmanship worthy of one of England's finest furniture makers. Together, those qualities transformed what seemed like an ordinary cupboard into a piece any serious collector would be proud to own.
If one went into a good gallery, where you'd have to go to buy such a piece as this today, you'd have to give between £25,000 and £30,000.
Well, I think she'll be rather stuffed.
I hope she'll be pleased with it.
For decades, this cabinet quietly stood in a family home, never needing elaborate decoration to prove its worth. It simply waited until someone with the right knowledge recognized what had been there all along. Sometimes the greatest antiques are not the ones that dominate a room, but the masterpieces whose true brilliance is visible only to those who know exactly what they are looking at.
This was my grandfather's watch. He was in the Navy. I'm not exactly sure how he came about owning it. I know it's a Rolex.
Okay.
Other than that, I don't really know anything.
The watch is a Rolex GMT. It's called a pointed crown guard, which means that the guard that holds the crown comes to a point.
But what his grandson did not realize was that some of the details that made this watch look old were actually the same details that made it so special. Because in the world of vintage Rolex collecting, newer does not always mean better. In fact, sometimes the marks left behind by time are exactly what collectors spend years searching for. This Rolex GMT-MASTER belongs to a generation that has become highly desirable, not just because of the name on the dial, but because of the small characteristics that survived after decades of use. One of the first things collectors look for is originality. Over the years, many older Rolex watches were sent in for servicing, and during those services, parts that looked worn, faded, or outdated were often replaced with newer versions. For an everyday owner, that made perfect sense. The watch came back looking cleaner and newer. But decades later, collectors started looking at those original parts very differently. The faded bezel that many people might think needs replacing can actually become one of the most attractive features of the watch. Over time, sunlight, age, and natural wear can slowly transform the original colors, creating what collectors often call a ghost bezel. Each one ages differently, meaning no two examples look exactly the same. And the same idea applies to the dial. Certain vintage Rolex dials can naturally change color after many years, developing warm brown tones that collectors call a tropical dial. The surprising part is that these changes were never intentionally created by Rolex. They happen naturally. They cannot simply be manufactured again. They are the result of decades passing over one specific watch. That is why vintage collectors often value preservation more than perfection. A flawless-looking replacement part may appear newer, but it removes part of the watch's original history. The scratches, fading, and aging that once seemed like imperfections can become proof that the watch has remained true to its original journey. And that is what made this GMT-MASTER so fascinating. It was not valuable because it looked untouched by time. It was valuable because so much of that time was still visible.
The retail value of a watch in this condition would be in the $40,000 to $45,000 price range.
Kidding me? You guys really like to go for the shock value, don't you? That's crazy. I'm going to be very careful about where it goes when we get home.
WINFRED REMBERT, Moonshiner's painting. Could a painting purchased simply to support a local artist become a piece that museums wanted to own years later? For the owner of Moonshiners, this was never an investment. It was just a moment when she and her husband were moved by the story of a unique artist and decided to buy his work to support him. But they never imagined that the painting hanging in their home was preserving a much larger story.
This is a painting by the New Haven artist WINFRED REMBERT. It's entitled Moonshiners, and it is hand-carved, tooled painting on leather.
From the material alone, WINFRED REMBERT's artwork was already different. Instead of painting on traditional canvas, he carved directly into leather and used color to transform personal memories into images. But what made Rembert's art special was not only the technique. Each piece reflected the people, communities, and experiences he witnessed throughout his life. And his journey to becoming an artist was unlike almost anyone else's.
And he did not start creating these artworks till he was about 50 or 51. He learned to tool leather in prison. And there was a guy there he called TJ the Tooler.
Rembert began creating art later in life, but he brought decades of memories and stories into his work. Over time, his paintings were no longer seen only as personal creations. They became unique records of history, memory, and everyday life. That was what dramatically changed his place in the art world. But the value of this piece would become even more astonishing.
The market has become very, very active. Museums now feel a need to have an example of his artwork.
Okay.
In today's market, retail, I would have no problem saying this is somewhere between $100,000 and $125,000.
This change was not only about the market, it also reflected how more people began recognizing the importance of the stories Rembert shared through his art. A painting once purchased out of respect for the artist had become part of a legacy that many people wanted to preserve. Attributed Pablo Picasso ballet drawing. In the art world, finding a genuine Picasso at a house clearance sale sounds almost too unbelievable to be true. So, could an old box of frames, purchased almost by chance, really contain a work by one of the most famous artists in history?
We have one of these famous cliches in the art world, which goes, I met this bloke the other day who says he bought a genuine Picasso in a house clearance sale. Where did you buy this?
A house clearance sale.
And who do you think it's by?
Picasso.
This is exactly the kind of discovery that makes experts curious, but also extremely cautious. Many works carrying the names of legendary artists have appeared on the market, but only a small number can survive the process of authentication. What made this case especially interesting was that the drawing did not come from a major collection. It came from a completely ordinary purchase.
And we stopped and we bought a beautiful 1930s Lalique plate a little oil painting and a box of, I suppose, miscellaneous frames, and paid about €50 for the box. And I suppose you can tell where this story is going.
So the box contains?
Yes. This.
Sometimes, an important art discovery begins with something that everyone else overlooks. But with Picasso, a signature is only one piece of the puzzle. Experts also need to examine the style, materials, period, and how closely the piece connects to the artist's known works. And this drawing had several details that made it fascinating.
Yes. I mean, it's got that wonderfully spare line. I mean, it looks like a work of the perhaps 1920s. They look like ballerinas, don't they?
Yes.
And there's a lovely simplicity in the line, you know.
Picasso was known for his ability to create powerful images using only the simplest lines. However, looking like Picasso's style does not guarantee that a piece was actually created by him. For artworks this important, official authentication is always the final step, and that became the biggest challenge for this drawing. With that challenge still ahead, the question remained, how much could this piece actually be worth?
There's only one way to get a Picasso through, and that's to go to the Picasso family and get the stamp of approval. And as I'm sure you know, that is no easy task. Sometimes they say yes, and sometimes they say no. If it's by Picasso and it's looking good, it's worth £60,000 to £80,000.
From a €50 box of old frames, this drawing became one of the most fascinating mysteries on Antiques Roadshow. Although the final answer depends on authentication, it represents the hope that every collector dreams about. Sometimes, an incredible work of art may be hiding in the most unexpected places.
Now, the sight of a box like this often heralds the fact that it contains something by Fabergé. And when we open it up like this, we can see that it's certainly Russian, but not necessarily by Fabergé.
From the moment the box was opened, the expert realized this was not an ordinary diamond ring. In the world of antique jewelry, small details like a box, a signature, or the name of a maker can reveal a lot about the origin of a piece. At first, the ring brought to mind high-end Russian jewelry from the early 20th century. But the story behind it was what made the piece even more fascinating.
Well, I'm surprised you said Russian, actually, because I inherited it from my mother-in-law, and her father, I understand, bought it when the Romanian royal family had to sell all their jewels and they were no longer becoming royal and they were sent out to Romania. So I suppose I sort of thought that writing on the box was Romanian.
For many years, the family believed the ring had a special past, but they could not fully confirm the story. For jewelry connected to aristocratic families, provenance can be just as important as the materials or gemstones. The box suggested a connection to luxury Russian jewelry from the early 20th century, a period when Russian jewelers were known for pieces created for nobility and royalty. And when the expert examined it more closely, the clues on the box began to reveal more about its journey.
Well, it's certainly in Cyrillic, and actually I think what it does say is that it's retailed by a jeweler called Malkanar, and then underneath of Odessa. And I think we can be absolutely sure that this is contemporary with Fabergé, not only from the style of the box, but also from the style of the ring.
Although it was not made by Fabergé, the ring still belonged to the same era of luxurious Russian jewelry. The combination of elegant design, precious materials, and fine craftsmanship showed that this was a piece made for someone extremely wealthy. But for the owner, the most important question was whether the family story was actually true.
And I can't see much hope of buying a Russian ring like that really for much less than about £7,000, £8,000, £9,000.
Well, that's very reassuring.
Although the original owner could not be identified, the quality of the craftsmanship suggested it almost certainly belonged to someone of high status. From a family piece with a mysterious origin, the ring became a small connection to the history and world of European aristocratic jewelry.
I love to see a jewel in its original box, and this definitely looks like it's been on a real journey. Tell me about the journey.
Well, my granddad bought it for my nana in probably the 1930s or 40s.
Sometimes, a small detail like the original box can help tell more of the story behind a piece of jewelry. For collectors, elements such as the box or ownership history can show how carefully an item has been preserved and valued over time. But beyond the family story, this ring also had technical details that especially caught the expert's attention.
I mean, it's because it's quite a big diamond.
It is.
You know,
it is.
It's just under 2.5 carats.
Right.
In size, and it is set in platinum and 18-carat yellow gold.
A diamond of nearly 2.5 carats was already a highlight, but size is only one part of the evaluation. With antique diamonds, experts also examine the color, cut, and how the stone is presented within the original design. The combination of platinum and 1/8 carat gold reflects the style of fine jewelry from an earlier period, where precious materials were often used to protect and enhance the center stone.
It's fluorescing.
Right.
So if I put an actual UV light on it, not all diamonds do this, but some diamonds do this.
Fluorescence is a phenomenon where some diamonds react and glow under ultraviolet light because of natural characteristics within the stone structure. Beyond this reaction, the cutting style was another important clue. Before modern technology became common, diamonds were often cut in different styles, and those details can reveal when a stone was created.
And you say that it was given in about the 1930s, but that's about right for the style of cutting. At auction, you're probably going to be looking at in the region of about £4,000 to £6,000.
That's lovely.
The details found in the diamond helped connect the piece to the family story that had been passed down. More than just a gold and diamond ring, it preserved traces of a jewelry style from decades earlier. From a gift kept through time, the ring finally revealed value through its stone, craftsmanship, and the history behind it.
This is from our playbox. So when we were dressing up, we would put on the princess ring and the it was an armband. It would go around your arm, and we'd all dress up in mum's old saris and, you know, wander about pretending to be mummies and whatever aunties.
For many years, this bracelet was not seen as a valuable piece of jewelry, but simply as part of the family's childhood memories. It sat inside a playbox, used for dressing up and having fun, with no one realizing that behind its old appearance could be a completely different story. But on Antiques Roadshow, sometimes the most underestimated objects turn out to be the most surprising discoveries.
And again, it was tarnished and horrible and kind of dark brown, and I had it cleaned, and somebody said, "Oh, it's chips of uncut diamonds." So, okay.
With antique jewelry, especially pieces from cultures with a long history of craftsmanship like India, appearance does not always reveal true value. Many old gemstones were not cut according to modern standards, but instead preserved the traditional styles of their regions. These differences can sometimes cause genuine precious stones to be mistaken for much simpler materials.
No, I mean, it would be very unlikely that your mother would have just said, let's put this into the toy box, let the children play with it, if it happened to be anything but just brass and glass. Brass and glass.
I think it's brass and glass.
At first, everything seemed to confirm that this was only an ordinary decorative piece. But after a closer examination, the expert noticed details in the materials and craftsmanship that did not match that assumption. And the bracelet, once treated as a toy, began to reveal its true value.
They are diamonds, and they're very, very flat indeed.
Yes.
Typical cuts from the region. The brass and glass bracelet that you casually used as a plaything, £1,500 to £2,000.
Wow.
The stones that appeared ordinary turned out to be diamonds with a cutting style typical of the region. Not only that, the red stones were identified as spinel, a gemstone found in many historic pieces of jewelry and often mistaken for ruby. Combined with high-carat gold, the bracelet from the playbox was finally recognized as a real piece of jewelry. Something once used for dressing up became an unexpected discovery, proving that sometimes treasures can be hidden among the most familiar things.
It belongs to my mother.
Yes.
She was left it in a will about 55 years ago.
Yes.
And she wore it as a young lady.
Yes.
Went dancing in it, and it fell off. So that's why it's been left in its box in the safe.
For many years, this serpent bracelet was kept away and rarely appeared again. But behind its impressive design was a story that went far beyond an ordinary piece of gold and diamond jewelry. During the Victorian era, images used in jewelry were often chosen with a purpose. Each symbol could represent love, memory, or personal messages that the owner wanted to preserve. And the serpent shape on this bracelet was the first important clue.
Yes, the snake biting its tail is a very ancient emblem of eternity. It's called the Ouroboros, the eternally renewing circle. And the fact it's gold that's incorruptible, and these are all metaphors for love.
During the Victorian period, jewelry was not only a display of wealth or social status, every shape, color, and material could carry its own meaning. The serpent became one of the most famous symbols of this era, especially after serpent jewelry became popular among the European upper class. But after a closer inspection, the expert discovered this bracelet was not simply a piece representing connection. Hidden behind the beauty of gold and diamonds was another layer of meaning, something much deeper and more emotional.
But it's more than that, actually. It's probably a very sophisticated piece of mourning jewelry. So, mourning is love beyond the grave.
Mourning jewelry was created to preserve memories of loved ones who had passed away. Rather than just decoration, these pieces became personal keepsakes, combining craftsmanship with the stories of the people who owned them. And on this bracelet, a small hidden detail on the back revealed its true meaning.
And so, I think it's worth £8,000 to £10,000.
Really? As much as that? Ooh, goodness.
The hidden details transform this bracelet from a beautiful piece of jewelry into an object preserving memories from nearly 2 centuries ago. Together with its flexible design, well-preserved enamel, and diamond-decorated serpent head, the piece showed the exceptional craftsmanship of the Victorian era. A bracelet that spent years locked away in a safe ultimately revealed a story of love, loss, and the jewelry-making skill of a time long past. After a story that began on the ocean floor, number 23 brings us back to something much more familiar, a small children's porcelain set that could easily have been found in countless family homes at the beginning of the 20th century.
My father-in-law, he was born in the 1890s. I'm not certain exactly when or where, but they were his as a child, and he always talked about them, and then he passed away and they came to me.
Like many antiques roadshow stories, this one begins with a family heirloom passed down through generations. The appraiser's real question, however, wasn't who had owned the porcelain first, but whether this seemingly ordinary children's set possessed anything that could separate it from the countless mass-produced souvenirs of the early 20th century.
They're German porcelain, and they were made for children as gifts. Most of these were very inexpensive when they were new. Now, if these were just plain white, which some of them are, they would literally be worth $1 or be a kind of garage sale item.
Right.
If they had flowers on them, they might be perhaps $5 for the two.
At first, the outlook was fairly modest. Children's porcelain like this was never especially rare, and its value depended almost entirely on the decoration. The more distinctive the design, the greater the interest from collectors. That's why the appraiser carefully examined every decorative detail instead of focusing only on the porcelain itself.
The dogs and cats are really elevating the value, but let's turn it around and see what else is on it. You've got, on both pieces, an automobile. Now,
then one small detail completely changed the direction of the appraisal. Throughout the history of decorative arts, images capturing new inventions have always fascinated collectors because they preserve the exact moment when the world was entering a new era.
And you see very little images of automobiles at this period. I would date this to about 1905. That automobile image kind of trumps everything in terms of value.
That is what makes this porcelain set so remarkable. It isn't the craftsmanship or the material that sets it apart, but a decoration that captures one of the earliest chapters in the history of the automobile. That single feature lifts these pieces beyond ordinary children's porcelain and into a far more interesting collecting category.
I would say because they are of this period, with the automobile, the pair of them in a good antique shop would certainly sell for about $150 or perhaps as much as $200.
Okay.
The final valuation came to just $150 to $200, but number 23 highlights one of the most fascinating principles in the antiques world. Sometimes the smallest detail is the one that defines an object's entire value.
It belonged to an aunt of mine, and when she moved house, she asked my husband if he'd like it.
So your husband liked it. Do you like it?
Not particularly, no.
What's the one word that would sum it up, do you think?
Ugly.
Not everyone appreciates a Martin Brothers piece the first time they see one. Distorted faces, strange human-like creatures, and exaggerated expressions make these works look more like characters from an old fantasy tale than traditional decorative pottery. Yet those very qualities have made Martin Brothers one of the most sought-after names in British art pottery, attracting collectors who value originality far more than conventional beauty.
Well, the one word for me is grotesque. Do you know where the word comes from? No. It means grottos.
The term grotesque dates back to the Renaissance and describes imaginative, unconventional figures inspired by the rediscovery of ancient Roman art. By the late 19th century, the Martin Brothers had transformed that centuries-old artistic tradition into pottery, producing works that challenged expectations and encouraged viewers to look beyond appearance.
And here we see it in the late Victorian version. We've got a date here for 1890. The thing I like about the Martin Brothers is that they had a sense of humor.
That sense of humor, combined with bold creativity and a willingness to ignore artistic conventions, became the signature of the Martin Brothers. Like many antiques that have survived for well over a century, however, this vase isn't in perfect condition, and its condition would ultimately play an important role in determining its value.
Sadly, it does have this hairline fracture in it, in the bottom, so that does detract from the value in quite a big way. If you were to sell it, it would probably go to a Martin Brothers collector. They would pay somewhere, I think, between £400 and £700 for it.
Very good.
The final valuation came in at £400 to £700. Not an extraordinary figure compared with the remarkable treasures still ahead in today's countdown, but number 22 is a reminder that great art isn't always measured by traditional beauty. Sometimes it's originality, personality, and the courage to be different that make a piece truly collectible. And after a vase that celebrates the wonderfully strange world of British grotesque pottery, we're heading in the opposite direction to a miniature masterpiece where an entire world is painted onto a surface so small that every brushstroke leaves the experts in awe. This vase doesn't stand out because of its size or its glaze. What makes it truly remarkable is an extraordinary level of craftsmanship, where every tiny space on its surface has been used to tell a story.
I think many years ago by a patient. He was a GP in Lincolnshire, and I think he was given this just as a gift one time.
By the late 19th century, Japanese decorative arts had entered an era where miniature craftsmanship reached an extraordinary level. Artists weren't simply making objects smaller, they were fitting more detail into less space, pushing the limits of precision and transforming even the smallest pieces into remarkable works of art.
When you're looking at it, even at this distance, what you see is a blue vase with a couple of panels. I'm lucky, of course, being myopic, and I'm going to look really closely. To be able to paint like that, using one hair of a brush, and probably going blind in the process, is breathtaking.
From a distance, it appears to be nothing more than a small blue vase with a few decorative panels. But the closer you look, the more each panel unfolds into a complete scene, filled with astonishing depth, color, and detail, so intricate that it's difficult to imagine they were painted entirely by hand. It's the kind of artistry that rivals works many times its size.
This is miniaturism gone completely mad.
I hadn't realised all that detail was on it.
Well, there you are. I mean, this is a universe on a small piece of pottery.
It's no surprise that the appraiser described it as a universe on a small piece of pottery. That wasn't simply a compliment for its beauty, it was recognition of the extraordinary patience, precision, and artistic skill required to create something so incredibly detailed.
This is, in fact, from the workshop. It's an impressed mark. It says Kinkazan. I think it would probably fetch somewhere between £1,200 and £1,800.
All right, goodness.
The final valuation of £1,200 to £1,800 proves that size has never determined the true value of a work of art. Do you agree with the appraiser's valuation? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Tang Dynasty Marble Lion. After a modern art icon worth millions of pounds, the countdown travels back more than 1,000 years to an object whose true value was unknown even to the family who owned it. For decades, this marble lion was simply seen as something their grandparents brought back from their travels in China. They knew it might be special, but no one expected this familiar family piece to be an ancient masterpiece.
My grandparents picked it up. They traveled a lot in China.
And when were they in China?
Probably the early part of the century.
Okay, where have you had this since then?
The family history made the story interesting, but one major question remained. When was this lion actually created? At first, it was believed to possibly come from the Ming Dynasty, but the expert quickly noticed signs pointing to something even more impressive. From the quality of the marble to the way the body was carved, every detail suggested this was far more than a simple decorative object. And the expert's first reaction revealed just how special it was.
Okay, well, I'll start out by saying when this came up, I could barely...
I could tell.
It's fantastic. This is truly... Oh, sorry, I'm all worked up. This is among the finest examples of Chinese art that we have seen on the Roadshow.
That excitement was not only about the sculpture's appearance. In ancient Chinese art, lions represented power, protection, and strength. But what truly separated this piece was the craftsmanship. The artist transformed a solid piece of stone into a figure that felt full of weight, movement, and life. After examining it more closely, the expert discovered that the original belief about its age was not impressive enough.
Now, one of the things he was wrong about is it's not Ming Dynasty. This dates from the golden period of Chinese art, which is called the Tang Dynasty, between the 6th century and the 9th century.
Wow.
The lion was not from the Ming Dynasty. It was much older. The Tang Dynasty is considered one of the greatest periods in Chinese art, when sculpture reached an extraordinary level of refinement. With its age, rarity, craftsmanship, and clear family history, this marble lion became an incredible discovery. And the final valuation left the owner completely surprised.
Now, the value I gave you is an auction estimate value. An insurance figure on this would be somewhere between $150,000 and $250,000, probably toward the high end. I would say around $250,000.
Wow.
The name of the artist may be lost, but more than 1,000 years later, their skill still survives in every detail of this marble lion. Harry Keller Illusion Head. Continuing the countdown is a mysterious object from the world of stage magic. It no longer has its original mechanism, and no one knows exactly what audiences saw it do over a century ago. The owner bought this wooden head because of a fascinating story connected to one of the biggest names in magic history.
Found this online, and basically an antique store in London that didn't specialize in magic, but just like high-end antiques. They had this head. They acquired it from an artist who acquired it in New York in about the 60s, and they bought it with the understanding that it had belonged to Houdini and it was used in illusions.
A connection to Houdini could make any magic prop special, but further research revealed a different possibility. The facial features and historical images suggested this head was actually connected to Harry Keller, one of America's most influential magicians before Houdini.
You look at pictures and posters of Harry Keller, and there's a pretty astonishing resemblance. I'm right there with you. I believe it is Harry Keller. Harry Keller is known as the Dean of American Magicians. He was born in 1849 and had kind of an odd career beforehand.
During the late 19th century, Keller was famous for large theatrical illusions using custom-made equipment and complex stage effects. Few of these original props still exist today. And because Keller had a close connection with Houdini, part of the original story may still have been true. The remaining question was how this strange object was actually used.
At a guess, my thought is probably used for a spiritualism trick of some sort, a levitating head of some sort. Do you have any idea how you might use it?
We've kind of think that it could be a spirit cabinet type thing.
The head may have been part of an illusion inspired by spiritualism, where supernatural-looking effects amazed audiences. But magic props are difficult to research because their secrets were carefully protected. Over time, many methods disappeared with the performers who created them. That mystery, combined with its rarity and craftsmanship, made the piece incredibly valuable.
But I would have no problem putting an insurance estimate of $60,000 to $80,000 on it.
Oh, yeah. Wow. Ha.
And I'm sure that there are a few people who would probably pay much more.
Bought for around $5,000, this mysterious wooden head received an insurance value of up to $80,000. But beyond the price, it represents an era when magic, theater, and mystery were deeply connected. More than a century later, the illusion may be gone. But the secret behind this remarkable piece still remains. Folk art root sculpture. Continuing the countdown is a piece that was not made from bronze, precious stone, or any expensive material. At first glance, it simply looks like a twisted tree root with unusual shapes. There is no signature and no famous artist attached to it. But the moment the owner saw it, she knew this was not an ordinary object.
I think I started to dance around, and my niece describes it as the happy dance because it was something so peculiar that I knew it was special.
A piece of folk art has to have a lot of things going for it to be great. It has to draw you in.
Yes.
And that's exactly what this does.
Before it was discovered, the piece had been sitting in a garage in South Jersey for years. No one knew exactly who created it or what its original purpose was. But in the world of folk art, the most important thing is not always a famous name. It is the imagination and ability to turn ordinary materials into something completely unique. From the natural roots, the maker found the shapes of snakes, birds, cats, and other creatures hidden inside. And the longer people looked, the more details they discovered.
It has a great old finish on it, and it's kind of like those spooky trees in the old tales. It fascinates me, it drives me crazy, and it kind of scares me too.
That strange mix of fascination and mystery is what makes this piece special. It was not designed to look perfect or traditionally beautiful. Instead, the artist kept the natural twists and forms of the roots, transforming them into their own world. Experts believe the piece was likely created around 1890 or 1900. Despite some signs of age, its condition and incredible detail made it an impressive example of folk art.
There's a little bit of wear up here, but I tell you something, to a non-folk art person, this is probably ugly as a mud fence. But to the people that collect folk art, it's a thing of great beauty. So much detail.
This is exactly the kind of artwork that can divide opinions. Some people may only see a strange piece of wood. But for folk art collectors, that originality and personality are what create its value. No two roots grow the same way, making this sculpture almost impossible to recreate. That rarity led to a surprising valuation.
And as far as value is concerned, we really agonized over that part of it.
Okay.
I would say a good auction estimate would be $30,000 to $50,000.
That's incredible.
From a tree root forgotten in a garage to an estimate of $30,000 to $50,000, its value did not come from the original material. It came from the imagination of an unknown artist who saw something extraordinary where others may have seen nothing. A strange sculpture, but that uniqueness is exactly what made it unforgettable. Ancient Egyptian alabaster canopic jar with imseti head. Continuing the countdown is a jar that was not created for everyday life. Its appearance may look like an ancient decorative object, but its true purpose was connected to one of the most important rituals of ancient Egypt. For years, the family only knew it as something their grandfather purchased during his travels. But they had no idea they were keeping an artifact with thousands of years of history.
My grandparents traveled extensively pre-war and obviously ended up in Cairo at one point. And my grandfather, who loved to collect beautiful things, bought this canopic jar.
Yeah, well, I collect scarabs, but I've never had the luck to find one of these.
The grandfather bought the jar for its beauty, but ancient Egyptians created objects like this with a much deeper meaning. Canopic jars were used during mummification to protect the important organs of the deceased. Each jar in a set of 4 represented one of the sons of Horus, serving as a guardian for the journey into the afterlife.
But as you know, as you've just said, it's a canopic jar. And you probably know, these jars were put in the tombs of embalmed bodies with the embalmed vital organs inside each one of them, because there were 4.
The human-shaped lid shows this figure is imseti, the protector associated with the liver. But the value of the jar came from more than just its age. The alabaster material, craftsmanship, and especially its clear ownership history all made it more significant. The family even kept the original receipt from Cairo, an important detail for an artifact thousands of years old.
This is the receipt, isn't it, for it?
Yes.
From what date was this?
The receipt helped prove that the jar had been in the family since before World War II. For Egyptian antiquities, provenance like this can make a major difference. After examining it, the expert identified the piece as likely coming from the 19th dynasty, an era connected with famous pharaohs such as Ramesses II. That meant this jar could be more than 3,000 years old.
This type is usually from the 19th dynasty. That's about 1290 to 1180 BC. That's the time of Ramses and Set. So if it's confirmed, which I'm sure it is, that it's from that date, it could make £4,500, and it could possibly make more.
But the most fascinating part is its journey. An object once created to protect something precious inside an ancient Egyptian tomb was eventually protected by one family for generations. More than 3,000 years later, its story continues. Diego Rivera's El Albañil.
The painting for some time was in bad condition, and it was hanging behind a door.
Behind a door?
Behind a door in the house. If that door was open, then you couldn't see the painting.
That was the story behind Diego Rivera's El Albañil. The owner's family had possessed the painting for more than 80 years, yet for much of that time, they had no idea they were living with an important piece of Mexican art history. What immediately caught the experts' attention wasn't the painting's condition, but the story surrounding it. In the art world, there is one phrase that always excites researchers.
There are two extraordinarily intriguing words in an artist's catalog of paintings, and those are whereabouts unknown.
For decades, El Albañil had been considered a lost painting. Records of the work still existed in Mexico City, but nobody knew where it was. Now, after years of being missing, it had unexpectedly surfaced on the Antiques Roadshow appraisal table.
Diego Rivera, who is arguably one of the most important Latin American 20th century artists, was only 18 years old.
Rivera painted this work in 1904 when he was just 18 years old. It comes from an extremely early period in the career of the man who would later become one of the most important Latin American artists of the 20th century. Even the signature tells part of that story.
It's a very young man's signature. It's one of his school signatures rather than the more formal, mature signature that we'll see later.
Oh, really?
After being authenticated and restored, the painting was no longer a forgotten family possession. It had reclaimed its place in the history of art.
I think you have something of a painting trifecta here.
A great artist, a remarkable story, and an important painting. That combination led to an extraordinary valuation.
I would be putting a retail estimate on the piece of between $800,000 and $1 million.
Seriously?
Seriously.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Unbelievable. I did not expect that. I'm astounded. I don't